They asked Ibn Arabi, "Master, is there truly a prayer that can open the doors of wealth and bring a home to one who has none?" He smiled softly and replied, "Allah is the giver of homes, the builder of worlds. But before He builds walls for you, He builds your heart to hold gratitude. When the heart is ready, the house appears." His students listened, leaning closer as he spoke again. There is a method, but it is not a formula. It is a surrender, a way of remembering the source of every blessing. He then explained the ancient method that few remembered. "Before you sleep," he said, "recite Surah Al-Waqiah and give thanks for the roof you have, even if it is only the sky. Say from your heart, Ya Razak, you are the provider of all means. If it is good for my faith, grant me a home built by your mercy. Then sleep with trust, not with worry." His students asked, "And if nothing happens?" He smiled again. "Then something is happening within you. Allah always answers, sometimes with a gift, sometimes by preparing the vessel that will hold it." Days passed, and one of his disciples, a poor man named Yusuf, followed this method. Every night he prayed as the Master said. At first, nothing changed. His small tent still leaked when it rained. But inside, something was shifting. His fear began to fade. Gratitude started to grow where complaint once lived. One morning, Yusuf woke before dawn and felt a strange peace. He whispered, "Ya Allah, if you choose for me to have a home, let it be one where your name is remembered." That very day, a wealthy merchant approached him in the marketplace and said, "I need a caretaker for my empty house outside the city. You may live there if you wish." When Yusuf told Ibn Arabi, the Master smiled and said, "You see, Allah never delays. He simply waits for your heart to match His gift." Then he revealed the final secret. The true house you are asking for is not made of stone and wood. It is the house of peace Allah builds in the chest of those who trust Him completely. When that house is complete inside, the one outside will come without asking. He paused, looked at his students, and said, "So if you desire a home, remember, begin by furnishing your heart with contentment, clean it with dhikr, light it with gratitude, and open its door with patience. Allah will fill it, and then fill your hands." And that night, as the moon rose over Damascus, the students repeated the prayer together, their voices soft but steady, knowing that the one who owns the heavens also owns their future roofs. For the method of Ibn Arabi was not magic, it was alignment. A soul that trusts Allah completely already stands in the home it seeks. Days passed after Ibn Arabi shared his words, and the disciples began to see the world differently. They no longer looked at walls of clay and stone as signs of wealth, they saw them as reflections of the unseen. One of them, a young man named Khalid, came to the Master one morning and said, "My heart is at peace when I pray, but my home is still empty. What am I missing?" Ibn Arabi looked at him for a long moment and said, "You are asking for a home from Allah while still carrying the dust of impatience inside you. When you clean your heart, even the desert becomes your palace." Khalid bowed his head and asked, "Then what should I do, Master?" The old mystic smiled. "Stand in the night, when all are asleep. Recite Surah Al-Ikhlas 41 times and then say, Ya Wahhab, you who give without measure, build for me a place where I may bow in peace. Not for pride, but for prayer. Then leave it to Him." That night, Khalid stood alone under the stars. The city slept, the wind was silent, and his voice trembled as he recited. The words felt heavy at first, but then, as he repeated them, they began to flow like water. He no longer felt like a beggar asking for bricks, he felt like a lover speaking to the one who always listens. Weeks went by. One afternoon, while resting under a fig tree, a man approached him, an old builder who had once known his father. "Khalid," he said, "I'm finishing a house at the edge of the city, but the man who commissioned it has disappeared. The deed is in your family's name. It's yours now." When Khalid heard this, his knees gave way. Tears filled his eyes, and he whispered, "Subhanallah. The home was written for me before I even prayed for it." When he told Ibn Arabi, the master simply nodded. Allah's gifts arrive the moment your soul stops chasing them. What is yours in the unseen will always find you, not when you shout, but when you surrender. Then he added softly, "Remember this, Khalid, Allah does not give to fill your hands. He gives to test your gratitude. If you thank Him with every wall you walk through, He will make every house a masjid, and every roof a mercy." From that day, Khalid's house became known as Bayt al-Shukr, the house of gratitude. And every traveler who passed by found rest there, food, and prayer. For Ibn Arabi had taught them the secret: when you seek a home through trust, Allah builds one that shelters more than just you, it shelters hearts. As the years passed, Bayt al-Shukr became more than a home, it became a place of light. Travelers stopped there not for comfort, but for calm. They said that when you stepped through its door, the air itself whispered, "Alhamdulillah." Khalid never refused anyone, whether rich or poor, scholar or wanderer. Each evening he would light a lamp by the gate and say, "This is not my house, it is a reminder that every roof belongs to Allah." One night, a storm swept through Damascus. The winds tore trees from the ground and rain poured like rivers down the streets. Khalid opened his door to strangers all night long. By dawn, nearly 20 people were huddled inside, soaked and shivering. He gave them food, dry clothes, and his own bed. When the storm finally passed, they thanked him endlessly. But Khalid only smiled and said, "Do not thank me, thank the one who answered my prayer long before I knew what to ask." When Ibn Arabi came to visit him a few days later, Khalid told him everything. The old master looked around the house, its walls simple, its floors rough, but the peace inside undeniable. "So," he said, "you finally understand what the house was?" Khalid nodded. "Yes, master. It was never about owning walls. It was about building a place where Allah is remembered." Ibn Arabi smiled faintly. "Then your house is complete, both here and in the unseen. For every time you open this door to a soul in need, Allah opens another for you in paradise." He paused, then added quietly, "Tell those who ask for this method that it is not a secret of words, it is a secret of states. Gratitude builds the foundation, trust raises the walls, prayer lights the roof. And when love fills it, even the poorest man becomes a king in his own palace." That evening, after Ibn Arabi left, Khalid stood outside watching the sunset glow upon his humble home. He whispered, "Ya Allah, I asked you for shelter, and you made me a shelter for others. You gave me bricks, but you built a heart." And so, the method of Ibn Arabi spread, not as a formula for wealth, but as a remembrance that when Allah is the architect of your heart, every place you stand becomes a home. Years later, people still came from distant cities to see the house that had been born from a prayer. Bayt al-Shukr stood at the edge of Damascus, small and weathered, yet it felt alive, as though the walls themselves breathed peace. Every corner held the sound of Qur'an recited, every cup of water handed to a traveler was given in remembrance. Khalid had grown old. His beard had turned white like the plaster of his walls. One evening a student asked him, "Master, are you never afraid of losing this house? Of fire, of thieves, of death?" Khalid smiled gently and said, "How can I lose what was never mine? This house is not clay, it is a story written by Allah. When the wind comes, it only turns the page. He often sat at the doorway after the evening prayer, watching children play in the street. To them he would say, if you want Allah to give you a home, first build one inside your heart where He feels welcome. Sweep it of envy, wash it with patience, and decorate it with dhikr. When He sees His reflection there, He will give you a roof to match it. One night, a wealthy merchant who had heard of Khalid's story visited him. I wish to build a mansion in your name, he said, to honor your service to the people. Khalid shook his head. If you wish to honor me, build houses for those who have none. A home with no prayer is a prison, and a prayer with no compassion is an empty hall. The merchant lowered his eyes and whispered, then teach me how to begin. Khalid answered, begin with Bismillah, and with a door that never closes. When Khalid finally felt his last days approaching, he wrote a short note and placed it above the main door. It read, this house was built by gratitude, protected by trust, and filled by mercy. Whoever enters, remember the giver, not the gift. After his death, the neighbors kept his door open every evening, just as he had done. The poor still ate there, travelers still rested, and the lamp he used to light was never allowed to go out. And so the teaching of Ibn Arabi lived on, whispered in the streets, written in hearts, carried by every person who had once been sheltered beneath that roof. The true method to buy a house, they said, was to first purchase the nearness of Allah with sincerity. For once He resides in your heart, every place you stand becomes home. Years turned into generations, and still the light of Bayt al-Shukr never dimmed. The house remained small, but its story grew vast, a tale carried by merchants, scholars, and wanderers who swore that when they stepped inside, their worries melted away. Some said the walls glowed faintly at night, others said that the air smelled of musk and rain, but everyone agreed on one thing, the peace there was not of this world. A century after Khalid's passing, a drought struck Damascus. Crops withered, wells dried, and fear spread like fire. People gathered at Bayt al-Shukr seeking comfort. The caretaker, an old man who had inherited Khalid's keys, stood before the crowd and said, this house was born from gratitude. If we wish for rain, we must thank Allah before we ask. So they all raised their hands and recited Alhamdulillah again and again, hundreds of voices praising in unison. That very night, clouds rolled over the city, and rain fell for the first time in months. The people wept with joy. Someone whispered, it is Khalid's prayer still echoing through the stones. Others said, no, it is the mercy of the one who never forgets a heart that trusts. Years later, scholars came to document the story, but none could explain why the house never aged, why its walls never cracked, why its lamp never went dark. One of them finally wrote, perhaps Bayt al-Shukr endures because it was built not on earth, but on certainty. When a man builds with faith, even dust becomes eternal. And in the stillness of one quiet evening, as the call to prayer drifted through the narrow streets, the caretaker's grandson stood at the same doorway where Khalid once had. He looked at the lamp, still glowing after centuries, and whispered, Ya Allah, build for us hearts like this house, small in the world, vast in your presence. And let every home built by your name become a shelter for the lost. The wind carried his words into the night, mingling with the sound of the adhan, and it was said that somewhere far beyond the scene, Ibn Arabi's voice replied. The method was never about bricks. It was always about remembrance. When the soul remembers its builder, every step becomes a foundation, every breath, a wall of light. And thus the story of Bayt al-Shukr became not a tale of wealth, but a timeless reminder that the one who truly trusts Allah already lives inside the home he prayed for. Centuries passed, and the name Beit al-Shukr became legend. The people of Damascus no longer knew who had first built it, but every child knew the story, a house born from a prayer, where Allah Himself was the guest. Pilgrims would visit it before long journeys, touching its old wooden door and whispering, "Let my home be like this one, built by mercy." Some came seeking blessings, others came simply to sit in silence, because there was something in that silence, a warmth that reached deep inside the chest, a reminder that Allah was nearer than breath. Over the years, rulers rose and fell, empires shifted, but Beit al-Shukr survived every storm. Fires broke out in nearby markets, earthquakes shook the ground, yet the house always stood untouched. Scholars began calling it the house that remembers. They said it endured because every brick had been placed with dhikr, and the name of Allah still lingered in the mortar like perfume. One evening, a traveler from Andalusia, weary, barefoot, and lost, arrived at its gates. He had heard rumors of a house that answered prayers. The caretaker, now an old woman with kind eyes, welcomed him and gave him water. As he drank, he wept. "I've lost everything," he said, "my home, my family, my hope." She smiled and replied softly, "Then you found what Khalid once found. When Allah empties your hands, He is preparing your heart to receive something greater." That night, as the traveler slept beneath the same roof that had sheltered countless souls before him, he dreamed of a vast field of light, endless homes stretching to the horizon, each glowing with calm. In the center stood Khalid, radiant and peaceful, reciting the same words Ibn Arabi once taught. "If you wish for a house, build gratitude first. If you wish for wealth, plant contentment. What is yours will always come, when your heart is ready to receive it." When the traveler awoke, dawn had painted the sky gold. He fell to his knees and whispered, "Ya Allah, I asked you for a house, but you gave me yourself." And so, the story continued, not written in ink, but in hearts. For the method of Ibn Arabi did not end with Khalid, or the house, or even Damascus. It lived in every believer who understood that true ownership is not in the walls we build, but in the peace Allah builds within us. And somewhere in the unseen, perhaps even now, a lamp still burns inside Beit al-Shukr, a light that has never gone out, because it was lit by faith itself. And so, the story of Beit al-Shukr passed beyond the reach of history and entered the realm of remembrance. The streets of Damascus changed, the faces faded, empires became dust, yet the house endured, not because of stone or roof, but because it was built on a foundation that time cannot touch: trust in Allah. They say that on certain nights, when the city sleeps and the wind carries the scent of rain, a faint light still glows within its window, the same lamp Khalid once lit, the same prayer still echoing between the walls. And those who pass by feel something stir inside them, a whisper that says, "Gratitude is the door. Trust is the key. Allah is the builder." No one remembers when the last caretaker closed the door, or if it was ever truly closed at all. But in the hearts of those who heard its story, the house still stands, wide open, filled with peace, untouched by fear. For Ibn Arabi's method was never about owning a home, it was about being at home in Allah's will. And the secret that began in Damascus lives on in every believer who bows their head and says, "Ya Allah, I have no walls but your mercy, no roof but your love. Wherever I stand in remembrance of you, I am home." And that is the final truth of the house that was never built, because it was never meant to crumble. It was built in the unseen, and there it remains, glowing forever in the light of the one who said,